The vast network of the galactic Concord was humming. Information, crisp and clean, flowed between starships, orbital platforms, and the great administrative hubs at the galaxy's core. It was a symphony of logic, a civilization that had long ago decided that the most efficient path was the only correct one. On the outer edge of this great network, a world named Katar shone with a gentle blue-green light. It was not a member of the Concord. Its people, the Chitauri, had never developed faster-than-light travel, never built great cities of crystal and metal. They lived in harmony with their lush, wet world. Their societies built around complex family units and a deep spiritual connection to the living ecosystems around them. Their technology was biological, subtle. They communicated with soft patterns of light that danced across their skin and with gentle, melodic sounds. Now, a shadow was falling over Katar. It was not a physical shadow, but a reading on Concord sensors, a creeping wave of null energy, a cosmological weather pattern that slowly drained stars of their vitality and left planets cold and dead. It was moving through this sector, and Katar was in its path. The Concord had known for some time. It had calculated the timeline, the energy expenditure for a mass evacuation, and the long-term resource allocation for relocating an entire species. The numbers had been clear. The Kaitari were a Level 2 pre-joined species. They contributed nothing to the galactic economy. Their technology was primitive, and their biological distinctiveness, while noted, was not unique. The cost-benefit analysis was definitive. The Concord Council, composed of representatives from the powerful Siraxi, the mineral-based Gran, and the aquatic Vel, had reached a unanimous decision. A formal declaration was dispatched. It was not sent directly to Katar, but broadcast on general channels, as a matter of record. On the bridge of the deep space research vessel Gardenia, the crew watched it. Captain Park Ji-Hine sat in her command chair, her face a calm mask. She was a woman who carried the weight of command, not with stiffness, but with a quiet, watchful gravity. On her screen, the Siraxi diplomat, a being of sleek feathers and sharp angles, spoke in translated, toneless galactic standard. The Concord Council has reviewed the petition of the species designated Katari, the image said. While the situation is regrettable, the resource allocation required for a full-scale evacuation and resettlement does not align with strategic priorities. The Kaitari are advised to utilize their own planetary resources to seek solutions. Concord resources must be preserved for member species and for threats to galactic stability. The petition is dismissed. The screen shifted to a live feed from near Katar. A single blocky Kaitari vessel, clearly built with primitive fusion drives and generations-old technology, was pulling slowly away from the planet. It moved with a painful lethargy. In the background, their sun, Car Prime, already showed signs of dimming at the edges, a faint dulling of its vibrant yellow light. A low sound of disgust came from the engineering station. Kim Min-soo leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. So that's it? A regrettable situation? They're telling a species that just learned to put a tin can in orbit to solve an existential crisis with planetary resources? It's a death sentence by committee. At the science station, Lee Hana zoomed the image on the Kaitari ship. Her brow was furrowed, not in scientific calculation, but in deep unease. Look at the engine signature. It's erratic. They're burning fuel at an unsustainable rate just to achieve that speed. They don't have anywhere to go. They're just leaving home to die in the dark instead of on the surface. Diplomat Choi Tae-seok, who had been silently observing from his post near communications, finally spoke. His voice was always measured, a soft counterpoint to Min-soo's bluntness. The Concord's logic is internally consistent from their perspective. They operate on a scale of galactic utility. The Chitauri represent a net loss in that equation, utility, Min Su snapped, then caught Ji Hyan's look and lowered his voice. They're living beings. They have culture, families. You can see the structure of their ship. It's not a warship. It's an ark. They packed everything they could. Captain Park Ji Hyan had not taken her eyes off the drifting K-Tari vessel. The official dismissal played in her mind. Does not align with strategic priorities. She thought of the Gardenia's mission. They were a mapping and xenobiological survey ship, funded by a coalition of Earth-based corporations and scientific bodies. They were out here precisely because they were not the Concord. They were looking for things the Concord had dismissed as unimportant unique bacteria. Unusual planetary formations, the quiet poetry of untouched ecosystems. "Tae Siok," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Pull up the star charts. Plot the last known trajectory of that K-Tari vessel against our current survey route." The diplomat's fingers flew over his console. A moment later, a map hologram sprang to life between them. A dotted yellow line, representing the Gardenia's planned path through a nebula-rich sector, glowed softly. A sickly red line, the projected course of the K-Tari arc, wobbled away from K-Tar. The two lines were not parallel, but they came within a few light years of each other near a gravitational landmark the crew called the Sentinel Star. "It's not on our path," Tae Siok confirmed. "A diversion to an intercept course would take us approximately 4 days out of our schedule, and it would consume a non-trivial amount of fuel." Min Su opened his mouth, likely to list the exact fuel cost, but Ji Hyan held up a hand. She was still looking at the red line. It was so short. It didn't lead to another star, to a sanctuary. It just ended in the empty black between systems. 4 days, Ji Hyan repeated softly. Hana turned from her station. "Captain, their life support? If it's as basic as their engines, they'll be running on borrowed time. They'll be recycling air and water at maybe 60% efficiency. For a ship that size, with a population in the hundreds." She didn't finish the sentence. The bridge was quiet again, save for the soft hum of the Gardenia's own, infinitely more advanced systems. The official Concord dismissal seemed to hang in the air, a verdict passed by a court 1,000 light-years away. It was logical. It was efficient. It was the voice of a galaxy that had decided some lights were not worth the energy to save. Ji Hyan looked at her crew, at Min Su, whose technical mind was warring with his human heart, at Hana, whose life's work was understanding life in all its forms, at Tae Siok, who understood the rules better than any of them. She knew the regulations. She knew the potential political fallout. The Concord did not look kindly on independent actors complicating their tidy equations, but she also saw the red line on the map, ending in nothing. "Helm," Captain Park Ji Hyan said, her voice firm now. "The decision made in the space between one breath and the next. Plot a new course. Adjust for an intercept with that K-Tari vessel near the Sentinel Star. Maximum sustainable velocity." Min Su let out a breath, a tight smile on his face as he immediately began calling up engine diagnostics. Hana nodded once, a look of fierce approval in her eyes, and turned to start scanning for any biological data they could gather on the K-Tari. Tae Siok simply inclined his head, already thinking ahead to protocols. To careful first contact phrases. As the great engines of the Gardenia thrummed to a higher pitch and the stars outside the viewport began to streak, Ji Hyan gave the map one last look. They were leaving the planned, approved path. They were stepping into a space the galaxy had officially labeled as worthless. "Let's go and look," she said to her bridge, to herself. "We're just going to look." But in the quiet of her own mind, she knew that was not all they were going to do. They were going to see what the galaxy had chosen to dismiss. The space near the Sentinel Star was not truly empty. It was a graveyard of cold, dusty light, filled with the faint whispers of radio emissions from ancient stellar events. It was the perfect place to be forgotten. The K-Tari vessel, seen up close through the Gardenia's high-resolution scopes, was a heartbreaking sight that it was not a sleek starship. It was a collection of modules, seemingly bolted together in haste and desperation. Patches of crude weld seams glinted dully in the starlight. One of its 3 main engine pods was dark and cold, a blackened scar across its side suggesting a contained explosion. The other 2 fired in uneven, weak pulses, barely correcting the ship's slow drift. Thermal scans showed it was losing heat, bleeding its precious warmth into the void. It was a dying thing. Life signs are concentrated in the central 3 modules, Lee Hanna reported, her voice tight. The readings are weak. Stress hormones are off the charts. I'm picking up a consistent atmospheric leak in their primary habitat ring. They're patching it, but it's a losing battle. Kim Min-soo whistled lowly from his engineering station. Their power grid is a mess, fluctuating all over the place. They're probably rationing energy to life support, shutting down everything else. No shields, no long-range sensors. They're blind and freezing. Captain Park Ji-hyun watched the vessel tumble slowly in the void. Any response to our hails? Negative on standard Concord channels, Choi Tae-seok said. He had been broadcasting gentle, repetitive greetings on every frequency for the last hour. They either can't hear us, or their comm system is down. Try something else, Ji-hyun said. Broadcast a simple, repeating pulse. Light and tone. Something even a basic system might interpret as a friendly signal. Tae-seok nodded, his fingers moving. He sent out a simple sequence. A flash of the Gardenia's running lights, followed by a 3-toned audio chime, repeated every 30 seconds. For 10 long minutes, there was nothing. Then, a flicker. A single wavering light on the side of the K-Tari ship blinked in a rough, mimicking pattern. It was a navigation light, not a comms array. They see us, Min-soo said, leaning forward. A moment later, a crackle filled the bridge audio, resolving into a voice. It was translated by the ship's AI, but the weariness, the strain, came through perfectly. It was a soft, melodic voice, aged by fear and exhaustion. Unknown vessel. This is the Qatari siege ship Breath of Home. We receive your signal. Please. State your intention. There was a pause, and the voice added, so quiet it was almost a whisper. We have nothing left to trade. Ji-hyun felt those words like a physical weight. She nodded to Tae-seok. Breath of Home, this is Captain Park Ji-hyun of the human research vessel Gardenia. We have no desire for trade. We observed your situation. We are here to offer assistance. What is your most immediate need? A longer silence followed. They could imagine the stunned discussion on the other ship. Hope was a dangerous, unfamiliar commodity for them now. The voice returned, steadier this time. Assistance? The Concorde. They said no one would come. Our primary atmospheric recycler has failed. We are on backup. Carbon dioxide is rising. Many of our elders and young ones are sleeping and cannot wake. We cannot fix it. Understood, Ji-hyun said, her tone calm and sure. We can help with that, but we may need to bring some of your people aboard our ship to do it. Would you permit that? A small group, including your engineers. Another pause. To come aboard your vessel? We accept. We have little choice. But we are not warriors. We mean no harm. And we offer none, Ji-hyun said. Prepare your group. We will send a shuttle. The operation was swift. Min-soo and a medical officer piloted the utility shuttle over, docking manually with the K-Tari ship's irregular airlock. When they returned, The sight on the Gardenia's hangar bay camera made Hana gasp softly. 4 Qatari stepped shakily onto the deck. They were smaller than the average human, perhaps 4 feet tall. Their skin was a smooth, gray-green, like moss-covered stone, and across their bodies flowed delicate, intricate patterns of soft blue light. The light was faint, flickering uncertainly. They wore simple, woven garments. They huddled close together, their large, dark eyes wide with a terror they were trying hard to control. The leader, slightly taller, with more complex light patterns swirling slowly on its brow, stepped forward. It was impossible to tell its gender by human standards. Its translated voice was the one from the combs. I am Nia. I speak for our family roots. We thank you for this meeting. Captain Ji Hyan, who had come down to the hangar with Tae Seok and Hana, knelt slightly to be closer to their eye level. A gesture Tae Seok had suggested. You are welcome, Nia. I am Captain Park. This is Diplomat Choi and Xenobiologist Lee. My engineer, Kim, is already examining your recycler data. Nia's light patterns pulsed slightly. You are different from the images we saw of Concord species. Your tone, your posture. It is not transactional. We believe in helping those in need, Ji Hyan said simply. Can you show our doctor to those who are unwell? We have medical facilities. As the medical officer led 2 of the Qatari away, Nia remained with the 3rd, a younger one whose light patterns darted about nervously. This is Kale, my grandchild. Hannah offered a slow, gentle smile. Your bioluminescence is beautiful, she said. Is it a form of communication? Nia seemed to relax a fraction. It is feeling and thought. When we are with the living world, it is bright. Here, in the metal, it is quiet and afraid. As if to demonstrate, Nia gently touched the leaves of a small potted fern kept by the hangar entrance for atmosphere testing. The blue light on Nia's fingertips brightened, swirling into a peaceful, spiral pattern for a moment before fading again. Meanwhile, Min-Su's voice came over Ji Hyan's comm. Captain, I've seen the problem. It's a sealed microorganism tank that died. It's their biofilter. I can jury-rig a mechanical scrubber from our spares, but it'll only be a temporary fix. And their other systems are on the brink. This ship, it won't make it to another star. Not even close. Ji Hyan looked at Nia, who was watching her with those ancient, tired eyes. She knew what she had to ask. Nia, your ship is failing. We can patch it, but the journey you need is too long. Do you have a destination? Nia's light dimmed. A destination? No, we left home. We are looking for a place. Any place the great wave will not touch. We do not have the maps of the galaxy. We only have hope. The admission was devastating in its simplicity. Ji Hyan stood. She made her decision. There was no committee to consult. Then you will not find it in that ship. We have space. Our main cargo bay can be configured. It is large, with environmental controls. We can make it a place for you. For all of you. You can come aboard the Gardenia. The hangar bay fell utterly silent. Nia stared, light patterns frozen. Kale let out a small, soft chirping sound. All of us? Nia whispered. You would give shelter? To all? It is offered, Ji Hyan said. Tears, clear and silvery, welled in Nia's large eyes. They did not fall, but the light on Nia's skin bloomed suddenly into a radiant, warm gold. It was a silent, beautiful explosion of pure, stunned gratitude that needed no translation. Kale's own patterns burst into a frantic, joyful dance of yellow and green. On the bridge, watching the feed, Choi Tae-seok took a deep breath and began typing. He was drafting the message he knew he would have to send. The message to the Concord, informing them that the human vessel Gardenia had made contact with the dismissed Kaitari, and had taken them in. The cargo bay of the Gardenia was never meant to be a home. It was a vast, echoing space of gray deck plating and high, vaulted ceilings, designed for storage containers and rover vehicles. Now, it hummed with a different kind of energy. Environmental. Simulators, usually employed for delicate xenobiological samples, were working at full capacity. They filled one half of the bay with a gentle, misty atmosphere rich in nitrogen and oxygen, kept at a comfortable, Earth-like temperature and humidity. Kim Min-soo and his engineering team had erected temporary partitions, creating communal areas and private nooks using spare hull insulation and fabric. The Kaitari filed in, a quiet procession of 312 souls. They carried with them not possessions, but living things, small pots of soil holding fragile, glowing fungi, woven baskets with symbiotic root clusters, containers of water from their lost home. They moved silently, their bioluminescent patterns subdued but watchful. The fear from the hangar bay was still there, but it was now mixed with a dazed wonder. Elder Nia stood with Captain Park Ji-hyun at the entrance to the configured space. Nia's golden glow of gratitude had settled into a soft, steady pulse. "You have made a piece of the world for us," Nia said, the melodic voice filled with awe. "In the middle of the great nothing, you have made ground and air." "It is the best we can do for now," Ji-hyun replied. "Lee Hanna will work with you to make it more suitable. Tell us what you need." What the Kaitari needed, it turned out, was not more technology, but less. Under Lee Hanna's careful guidance, the sterile cargo bay began to transform. The Kantari, especially the younger ones like Kale, shyly requested permission to take cuttings and seedlings from the ship's arboretum, a small garden meant for research and crew mental health. Hanna agreed readily. What happened next fascinated the human crew. The Kaitari did not simply plant the ferns, mosses, and flowering vines. They touched the soil with their fingertips, their light patterns flowing into the dirt. They hummed to the seedlings, a low, resonant sound. They arranged the plants not in rows, but in intricate, flowing patterns that felt instinctively right. Within days, the partitioned area was no longer a makeshift shelter. It was a grotto. The air smelled of damp earth and sweet flowers. Katari's bioluminescence, reflected and amplified by glossy leaves and dewdrops, filled the space with a soft, dreamlike twilight. Lee Hanna spent hours there, taking notes. "It's not just cultivation," she explained to Ji-hyun and Min-soo in the mess hall. "It's communication. They're encouraging symbiotic relationships. The fungi they brought are cleaning the air at a rate our sensors can barely track. The plants are thriving beyond normal parameters. They're not just living in an environment. They're talking to it, and it's responding." Min-soo grunted, stirring his soup. "Well, whatever they're doing, it's taking a negligible load off the life support systems. Their corner of the ship is practically self-sustaining already. They use less water and power than a single crew deck." This quiet, growing miracle was happening in the cargo bay, but on the bridge, a tension was building. Choi Tae-seok had sent his formal notification to the nearest Concorde relay buoy, as required by interstellar protocol for independent vessels. It was a dry, factual account. Made contact with disabled Kaitari vessel. Took aboard survivors due to critical life support failure. Providing humanitarian aid. The reply, when it came 2 days later, was not dry. It was icy. On the main screen, the same Siraxi diplomat from the original dismissal appeared. Its feathers were perfectly groomed, its expression one of cold displeasure. "Captain Park of the Gardenia, you have overstepped. The Kaitari situation was resolved by Concorde Authority. Your humanitarian aid is an unsanctioned intervention. You are disrupting a calculated galactic process. Ji Hyan stood firm. A calculated process that ends with the extinction of a sentient species. We disrupted nothing but their journey into a vacuum. The Cyraxi's beak clicked. Sentience is not the sole metric. Sustainability is. Their relocation is resource inefficient. By intervening, you have made their problem your own, and now, by extension, a potential problem for this sector. You are ordered to disembark the K-Tari at the nearest viable planetary body. Coordinates are being transmitted. A chart appeared on a secondary screen. The designated viable planetary body was a grim, airless rock in a dead system, designated GC 7791. It had a gravity well and a solid surface. That was all. It was a place to dump cargo. Tae Seok, standing beside Ji Hyan, spoke with calm formality. Ambassador, GC 7791 cannot support Ketari life. It has no atmosphere, no accessible water. Disembarking them, there is a death sentence, just a slower one. Then you should have considered the long-term consequences of your emotional decision. Human, the Cyraxi replied, its tone final. The Concord will not allocate resources for their care. They are your responsibility. If you wish to be burdened by them, you may keep them aboard your vessel indefinitely. But you will not bring them into Concord space. This is the ruling. Comply or face consequences. The transmission cut off. The bridge was silent, the coordinates of the barren rock glowing ominously on the screen. Emotional decision. Min Su muttered from his station, his fists clenched. They say that like it's a disease. It is to them, Tae Seok said quietly. Logic without empathy is just cold math. They've done the math. Ji Hyan stared at the rock on the screen. GC to 7791, a galactic trash heap. She thought of the glowing grotto in her cargo bay, of Naya's peaceful light among the plants, of Kale's joyful patterns. She thought of the word shelter. It wasn't just about space. It was about safety. It was about hope. She turned to her crew. We don't take orders from the Concord. Our mandate is from Earth. Our mission is exploration and science. And the consequences? Tae Seok asked, though his eyes showed he already agreed with her. We are a small science vessel on the fringe, Ji Hyan said. What will they do? Send a warship to chase us for saving lives? The public relations would be a disaster for them, even within their own logic. It would be resource inefficient. She allowed herself a small, hard smile. No, we stay the course. Our original survey path takes us towards the Orion Arm frontier. We go there. We find a place, for us and for them. She walked to the comms panel and opened a ship-wide channel. Her voice was clear and steady. This is the captain. We have just reaffirmed our commitment to our guests. We are proceeding on our mission. The galaxy may have dismissed them, but they are under our protection. They are part of our crew now. Treat them as such. In the cargo bay grotto, Nia and several others heard the translated message. Nia did not understand all the politics, but the meaning in the captain's voice was unmistakable. We are not abandoning you. Nia placed a hand on the trunk of a small, transplanted tree. A pulse of deep, violet light, a color the humans had not seen before, flowed from Nia's hand into the bark. It was a color of profound, unbreakable bond. Around the grotto, the other K-Tare's lights softened, their fear finally, truly, beginning to fade. They were not cargo to be discarded. They were guests. They had shelter. Without heading a week of tense, quiet followed. The Gardenia moved steadily, putting distance between itself and the grim rock of GC 7791. The ship hummed with a new, dual rhythm, the familiar sounds of human industry and the softer, organic sounds from the cargo bay grotto. But the confrontation with the Concord was a shadow that hung over everything. It was a formal breach, and everyone knew it. Choi Tae-seok spent his days monitoring the communications array. He expected another direct order, a threat, something. What arrived was, in its own way, worse. It was an official bulletin, broadcast on all public Concord channels for the sector. It was a notice of censure. On the bridge screen, a different Siraxi official, its tone dripping with sterile disapproval, read the statement. The independent human vessel Gardenia is hereby cited for reckless intervention and violation of galactic resource protocols. By willfully taking on unviable biological burden, the Gardenia has compromised its operational integrity and poses a potential vector for instability. All Concord member species and affiliate stations are notified. The Gardenia is designated a vessel of compassionate liability. No aid, resupply, or safe harbor is to be offered within Concord-administered space until the liability is resolved. The words were like a door slamming shut across the stars. Compassionate liability. It made their act of shelter sound like a contagious disease. Min-soo slammed a hand on his console. Liability? We're more efficient than we've ever been. Our life support readings are optimal since they came aboard. Their little garden is scrubbing carbon like a champion. That is not the point, engineer, Tae-seok said, his voice weary. The point is to make an example of us, to show what happens when you defy their calculus. We are now quarantined by decree. Captain Park Ji-hyun listened, her expression unreadable. Can they enforce it? Out here? In the core systems, absolutely, Tae-seok said. On the frontier, it's a gray zone. But it means any outpost, any freighter that might have traded with us, will now think twice. They risk their own standing with the Concord. We are on our own. Just then, Lee Hana's voice, excited, broke through the grim atmosphere on the comms. Captain, you need to come to the grotto. You and Min-soo and Tae-seok. Right now. Exchanging looks, the three of them left the bridge. When the cargo bay doors slid open, the scent of living, thriving greenery washed over them. The space was transformed. It was a forest floor, dappled with the soft, colored light of the K-Tari. But the K-Tari were not resting. They were gathered around a large, flat section of deck plating they had covered in soil. Elder Nia stood in the center, Kale at their side. Nia's light pulsed with a gentle, insistent rhythm. Captain Park, you have been declared a liability for helping us. Ji-hyun was startled. How did you? We listen. We understand the tone of voices, even through walls. The galaxy dismisses you now, too. Nia's voice held no fear, only a deep, solemn understanding. You gave us shelter when you did not have to. Now we must offer something in return. Not to balance a scale, but because we are connected. Nia gestured to the soil. Our gift is not a technology. It is a knowing. We have listened to your ship. We have felt its rhythms, its breath. And we have listened to the stories of your engineer Kim about the dead worlds you map, the planets that cannot support life. Min-soo frowned, curious. Okay. Kale stepped forward, his youthful light patterns dancing with eager energy. He knelt and placed his hands on the soil. He began to hum, a low, two-tone vibration that seemed to make the deck plates tremble. The K-Tari around him joined in, a quiet, resonant chorus. Lee Hana pointed her scanner at the soil. Captain, look. On the scanner's display, a microscopic view of the dirt appeared. It was just ordinary shipboard compost. But as the K-Tari hummed, something changed. Dormant bacterial spores, present but inactive, suddenly burst into metabolic life. They multiplied at an impossible rate, forming complex, symbiotic chains. Then Kale lifted his hands. The blue light from his fingertips did not just glow. It seemed to seep into the soil, a visible, gentle infusion. Light is not just light for us, Nia explained softly. It is a catalyst, a signal. On our world, we help life remember how to grow in poor soil, in sick places. We do not build machines to clean water. We encourage the tiny living things that already know how. Hannah's scanner was going wild. They're not just growing plants. They're engineering a microbiome. A hyper-efficient, restorative one. They're turning barren compost into supercharged, living soil in minutes. Nia looked at Min-Su. You spoke of a world 2 jumps from here on your map. A rocky world with frozen water under stone and a dead atmosphere. You said it was useless. Min-Su blinked. Planetoid Delta 7, yes, no life. Thin, toxic atmosphere. But water ice in the poles. What if it was not useless? Nia asked. What if it was sleeping? Your machines can melt ice, can break stone. But they cannot call life back. We can. We can take a small piece of healthy life, like this. They gestured to the thriving grotto, and ask it to teach the dead ground. To wake it up. The idea hung in the air, immense and quiet. It wasn't terraforming in the human sense grand machines and atmospheric processors. It was more like gardening on a planetary scale. A whisper to the bedrock. The Saraxi's words echoed in Ji-Hyun's mind. Compassionate liability. Non-viable biological burden. She looked at her crew. Min-Su's eyes were wide, seeing not a problem, but a breathtaking engineering possibility. Hannah looked like she had been given the key to a new science. Tae-Seok wore a small, thoughtful smile. They dismissed you, Nia, because you had no technology to offer, Ji-Hyun said slowly. They are dismissing us for offering you shelter. They see only what can be taken, not what can be given. They see an end, not a beginning. Nia's light glowed warm and steady. Then let us show them a different kind of math. Not subtraction, multiplication. The plan formed not in a meeting, but right there in the green, glowing air of the grotto. They would not run and hide. They would go to Delta 7, a planet the Concord had scanned and cataloged as worthless. They would take the K-Tarius knowing and the humans' machines. Not to just survive, but to make something new. The Gardenia was no longer just a shelter or a research vessel fleeing censure. It was now a siege ship, carrying a different kind of hope. The kind that didn't just seek shelter, but could build it from stone in silence. Planetoid Delta 7 hung in the viewport, a sphere of dull, rusty red and gray. Scans confirmed it. A thin carbon dioxide atmosphere, frozen water locked in deep polar caps, and a surface of barren rock scoured by ancient winds. To the Concord database, it was a number, a mineralogical footnote. To the crew of the Gardenia and their guests, it was a blank page. The landing was a coordinated effort. The Gardenia settled on a wide, dusty plain near the equator, where geological surveys showed the ice cap was closest to the surface. Kim Min-Su directed the deployment of the heavy equipment from the cargo bay, not the K-Tarius grotto, but the other bays where the mining lasers, mobile drills, and atmospheric processors were stored. Great machines rumbled to life on the alien regolith, their noise a violent contrast to the planet's dead silence. Their job was brute force, to drill down to the water ice, melt it, and begin pumping vapor into the atmosphere. It was the first step, creating the raw materials for life. But the second step belonged to the Qatari. A smaller, pressurized dome was erected nearby. Inside, the Qatari worked. They had brought baskets of their living soil from the ship's grotto, samples of their most resilient fungi and mosses, and cuttings from the hardiest plants. Elder Nia moved slowly among them, their light a calm, guiding blue. Lee Hana was with them, her scanner linked to the Gardenia's main computer, recording everything. The humans watched through the dome's clear panels as the K-Tari began. They did not use machines. They knelt on the imported soil placed over the dead ground of Delta 7. They pressed their hands into it, and they began their work. It started with the hum. The same low, resonant tone, but here, multiplied by dozens of voices, it seemed to vibrate through the very floor of the dome. Then came the light. Not just a glow, but a focused, deliberate pouring of their bioluminescence into the earth. It streamed from their fingertips, their brows, like liquid energy sinking into the dirt. They're not just emitting light. Hana whispered over the combs to the bridge, her voice filled with awe. They're tuning it, modulating the frequency. They're broadcasting a biological signal. On her scanner, the microscopic view was a storm of activity. The imported microbes weren't just surviving. They were changing, adapting at a genetic pace, and communicating with the scant, dormant bacterial spores that had clung to life in Delta 7's harsh soil for eons. The K-Tari light and song were a catalyst, a key turning in a lock no human machine had even detected. Outside, Minsu's drills hit water. Geysers of steam erupted, captured by hovering condensers to begin the slow, laborious work of thickening the atmosphere. It would take months, years, to make it breathable by conventional understanding. But inside the dome, in just days, a green fuzz appeared on the soil. It was a lichen, a symbiotic fusion of fungus and algae that the Kitari had encouraged. It didn't wait for a perfect atmosphere. It began creating its own microclimate, processing the thin air and releasing tiny amounts of oxygen. Kale, his youthful energy focused, worked at the edge of the dome. He had taken a particular interest in the water samples brought up by Minsu's drills. He would hold a container of the melted, mineral-heavy ice, his hands glowing a soft cyan, humming his two-tone song. When Hannah tested the water afterwards, the harmful mineral precipitates had settled out anew. Benign bacterial chains were already thriving in it. They're not terraforming, Hannah reported to Captain Ji Hyan. They're healing. They're convincing the planet to heal itself. Awakening processes that were always there, just dormant. Weeks turned into a month. The changes were small but profound. A patch of green, no larger than a garden plot, now existed under the dome. But its effect was spreading. Sensors placed in the surrounding regolith showed a change in soil chemistry for meters around. The humidity inside the dome was higher. The air was cleaner. One evening, as the weak sun set, Captain Park Ji Hyan stood with Nia at the edge of the human mining operation, looking at the softly glowing dome. The massive, noisy machines were silent for the night. You were a seed ship, Nia, Ji Hyan said, carrying the last of your world. Nia's light pulsed gently. Yes, and you offered us soil. Now together, we have planted a new seed. Here. They gestured to the dome, and beyond it, to the planet. This is the answer to their dismissal, Captain. Not a weapon. Not an argument. But a garden where they said nothing could grow. Back on the Gardenia, Choi Tae-seok monitored the comms. The Concord sensor still stood. They were isolated, but he had begun broadcasting something new on a low-power, open frequency. Not a plea, not a defense. A simple data stream. It contained the atmospheric readings from Delta 7 before the K-Tari arrived, and the readings now. It showed the microscopic scans of the dead soil and the teeming symbiotic life under the dome. It was raw, undeniable data of a miracle in progress. He didn't know if anyone was listening. But the truth, he felt, should be sent. The day came for the Gardenia to leave. The ship's mission clock was ticking, and they had their own journey to continue. They would leave the heavy mining equipment, the atmospheric processors, and a prefabricated habitat for the K-Tari. But more importantly, they would leave the K-Tari themselves. It was not an abandonment. It was a fulfillment. At the airlock, the two groups stood together. The humans in their environment suits, the Kaitari in their simple woven clothes. Their light patterns bright and steady in the thin air of their new home. You gave us shelter when we were lost, Nia said to Ji Hyan, their light flowing with warm gold and deep violet gratitude and bond. Now we give you a place. This outpost is yours as much as ours. A safe harbor grown from a seed of compassion. Ji Hyan nodded, emotion tight in her throat. The galaxy dismissed you, Nia, but you were never worthless. You were a different kind of wealth. Thank you for showing us. Kim Min-soo clasped Kale's small shoulder. You look after those water recyclers, kid. And keep singing to the rocks. Kale's light danced in cheerful streaks of green. I will make the stones remember how to be alive. Lee Hanna simply bowed deeply to Nia, a gesture of profound scientific and personal respect. As the Gardenia's engines powered up, lifting the ship from the dusty plain, the crew on the bridge looked down. The mining site was quiet, but the dome glowed, a solitary, vibrant jewel of green and soft light against the vast, rusty red. They had not just saved a people. Together, they had created a new kind of answer, not with weapons or debates, but with water, song, and light. The Concord saw the universe as a ledger of gains and losses. The humans and the Kaitari had written a different equation, one where shelter offered became a garden shared. The Gardenia turned its nose towards the stars, towards the unknown frontier. They were still marked as a compassionate liability by the great powers of the galaxy. But on a once dead world behind them, a tiny, tenacious, glowing pulse of life now beat in the silent dark. It was a quiet proof that sometimes the most logical thing of all was to offer shelter and see what grew.